We appear to be live now.
We are now live on YouTube.
We're live. We're live.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your patience. As you know, we've been doing our meetings via Zoom, and tonight, because we have public hearings, instead of the standard Zoom meeting, we're doing a webinar, and we've had significant technical difficulties getting all the participants in. There's a first time for everything. Next time will be a little faster. So for those who have been waiting for this meeting to start, thank you for your patience. But we're now ready to call to order the regular meeting of the Tiverton Town Council, Monday, May 11th. I believe we have our flag. Yes, Councilor Edwards, thank you very much. So we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States
of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Our Deputy Clerk, would you like to take the roll, please?
Yes, ma'am. President Hilton,
Present.
Vice President DiMederos,
Present.
Councilor Perry,
Present.
Councilor Driggs,
Present.
Councilor Clark,
Present.
Councilor Cook,
Present.
and Councilor Edwards.
Present.
Excellent.
Just Council President, just for a reminder of those members of the council who are on by phone that can't be seen, when you please speak, please announce your name so it's clear that those people who may be listening by phone can know who's talking.
Excellent. Thank you.
And I don't know if at this point it might be appropriate, Mr. Edwards, if you want to give the people instructions if they want to call in to listen.
Absolutely. So for anybody who's looked at the agenda, there is a toll-free number to participate. It says audio only. The number is 877-853-5247. And once you connect, it's going to ask you for a meeting ID. That meeting ID is 969-0452-1204. Now, very important, when you call in, the second question it's going to ask for is a participant ID, which no one has because you haven't registered. So instead of entering the passcode, you're going to just hit the pound sign. Once you hit the pound sign, without entering any numbers or letters or anything, then it's going to ask you for the passcode. That passcode is 473411. Then you'll hit the pound sign and you'll be placed into the meeting.
As an attendee.
As an attendee, yes.
Right. Now, also, if you want to participate by Zoom, it is on the agenda, and you're going to go to www.zoom.us. There'll be a button that says join a meeting. When you hit that button that says join a meeting, you will be asked to put in the meeting ID, which is the same meeting ID that's on the agenda, 969-0452-1204. Once you place in that, you should be asked for a passcode. And the passcode is the same passcode that Mr. Edwards just indicated, 473411. And that should allow you to participate by Zoom as an attendee. If you're planning on participating in the public forum part of this, we will ask that you please raise your hand in Zoom. And when at the proper time, we will let you in and make a comment. So, and I believe if you're on the phone and want to make a comment, you also press *6. And that tells me that you want to raise your hand and we can let you in and at the time. But we will let you know when it's time for public comment and we will repeat those instructions.
Excellent. So the first thing this evening is that I'd like to ask the council if I could have a motion to amend the agenda. The reason being is that,
So moved.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank
No,
you.
I don't even know what you want to amend.
I don't even know what you want.
Well, hang on a second and then we can vote. We received 2 items that did not make it in time to be on the agenda, but I think they're both worthwhile, especially in light of what is going on. And these would be for discussion only, but an opportunity to acknowledge. The first is a resolution recognizing National Police Week of 2020, which is which is this week, and then also recognizing Emergency Medical Services Week, which is the week of May 7th to 23rd. And as I said, these came in too late to make our docket, but I would like to read them into the record and have discussion, and then we can put them on for ratification at our next meeting. So that's my request. There's a motion and a second. So I'll take a roll call vote. Council Perry,
Yes.
Council Clark,
Yes.
Council DiMederos, Denise,
Yes.
thank you. Council Cook,
Yes.
Councilor Edwards,
Yes.
and Councilor Driggs.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so I'm going to read both of these. If there are any comments, we'll be happy to hear them afterwards, and otherwise we'll put them on for on our consent agenda for our next meeting. But I really, especially given everything that police and our fire department are doing right now, I didn't want to miss these weeks. So the first is a resolution of the town council recognizing National Police Week 2020 and honoring the service and sacrifice of law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty while protecting our communities and safeguarding our democracy. Whereas there are approximately 900,000 law enforcement officers serving in communities across the United States, including all dedicated Tiverton police officers. Whereas nearly 60,211 assaults against law enforcement officers were reported in 2017, resulting in approximately 17,476 injuries. Whereas preliminary figures for 2020 show 86 police officers from January 1st, 2020 to May 11th, 2020 have made the ultimate sacrifice, of which 26 were as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Whereas since the first recorded death in 1791, almost 20,000 law enforcement officers in the United States have made the ultimate sacrifice and been killed in the line of duty. Whereas the names of these dedicated public servants are engraved on the walls of the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial in Washington, D.C. Whereas May 15th is designated as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of all the fallen officers and their families. Therefore, be it resolved that the Tiverton Town Council formally designates May 11 through 27, 2020 as Police Week in the town of Tiverton and publicly salutes the service of law enforcement officers in our community and in communities across the nation.
Tell you how to get in.
I know, it doesn't work for outsiders.
I think we all agree, especially under the circumstances, that this is something we want to support. As I said, we'll put it on our consent agenda, but to let everybody know that this is Police Week in the town of Tiverton, and an enormous thank you to our Tiverton Police Department. And the second one is EMS Week. A resolution of the town of Tiverton to designate the week of May 17th through 23rd, 2020 as Emergency Medical Services Week. Whereas emergency medical services is a vital public service, and whereas the members of emergency medical service teams, including the Tiverton Fire Department, are ready to provide life-saving care to those in need 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And whereas access to quality emergency care dramatically improves the survival and recovery rate of those who experience sudden illness or injury. And whereas emergency medical services has grown to fill a gap by providing important out-of-hospital care, including preventative medicine, follow-up care, and access to telemedicine. And whereas the emergency medical services system consists of first responders, emergency medical technicians, paramedics, emergency medical dispatchers, firefighters, police officers, educators, administrators, pre-hospital nurses, emergency physicians, trained members of the public, and other out-of-hospital medical care providers. And whereas the members of emergency medical services teams, whether career or volunteer, engage in thousands of hours of specialized training and continuing education to enhance their life-saving skills And whereas it is appropriate to recognize the value and accomplishments of emergency medical service providers by designating Emergency Medical Services Week. Now, therefore, in recognition of this event, do we hereby proclaim the week of May 17th through 23rd, 2020 as Emergency Medical Services Week. Again, especially under the circumstances, our fire department is doing an outstanding job. And I think we all want to recognize them and express our appreciation. Any comments from the council? Okay, in that case, we'll move on to our consent agenda. Starting with item A, the approval of town council minutes, April 27, 2020, the regular meeting. Acknowledge receipt of minutes from boards and commissions and committees. There's a set from the Tiverton Recreation and Beach Commission. Acknowledge receipt of reports, police and fire department overtime reports, April 2020, department monthly reports, April 2020, and a report from Susan Gill, Planning Board Administrative Officer, report of activities ending April 28th, 2020. Item D, acknowledge receipt of correspondence, the North Smithfield School Committee resolution urging continued appropriation of state and local revenues to support public education. Also, the Smithfield School Department resolution urging continued appropriation of state and local revenues to support public education. And finally, the town of Barrington, a resolution recognizing the month of June as Barrington Pride Month. Item E, approval of the tax assessor abatements. Item F, the town administrator, approval to advertise requests for proposals for professional auditing services and agreed upon procedure services. And finally, item G, the Recreation Commission Chair Stu Gilfillan requests approval to advertise and schedule a public hearing to amend fines and fees resolution regarding beach passes. Would any counselor like to remove anything from the consent agenda?
This is Donna.
Yes.
I
Donna?
wanted to pull 4C2.
C2.
Yeah, C2, department monthly reports.
Okay. Anyone else? John?
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to approve the remainder of the consent agenda minus 4C2.
Second.
There's a motion and a second from
This is
Joe.
Denise. This is Denise.
Yes, Denise.
I don't know why you're not hearing me, but I want to pull something off.
Oh, okay. What would you like?
4C1,
C-
firefighter overtime reports,
Yep.
and 4F, going out for bid for the audit.
Okay.
Madam President,
Yes, John.
I amend my motion to remove 4C1 and 4F. And my motion would be for the remainder of the consent agenda minus 4C1, 2, and F.
And F. There's a
Second.
motion and a second. A vote. Counselor Edwards,
Yes.
Counselor Driggs,
Yes.
Counselor Clark,
Yes.
Counselor DiMederos,
Yes.
Counselor Cook,
Yes,
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Okay, so we'll go in order. C1, which is the police and fire department overtime report. Denise?
All right, I'm looking at the Tiverton Fire Department overtime. If you look at the second line, it says for the pay period of 4/10/20, and I think there's a typo. I think it should be 4/23/20. And the number is 4493.07. And that seems like an exuberant amount for 13 days. Is there a reason why the overtime was so high that week or that 2 weeks?
Don't know. I'm assuming that was the normal course of business, but we can ask the chief. He's on.
Well, I'm only concerned, Chris, because the line above was only 1,700. So what made those 13 weeks
Hang on.
so high? That is very high.
Can,
Is the chief on, is the chief available? I think he's actually online with us, yes?
I am, Madam President. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead, Chief Malo.
unfortunately, I don't have the payroll information in front of me, but the only thing that I would say about that is, in addition to just the regular overtime, we do have a firefighter that's out presently at the fire academy. So we replace him on a daily basis. We've had a firefighter out injured, and there was I'm sorry, it slips my mind right now, but we had another person that was out as well. So for that period of time, it does seem a little bit high, but we had instances where we had maybe 3 people out at one time.
Now, the fire academy is that, because why was that firefighter at the fire academy?
That's to fill the last vacancy that we have.
Okay. Well, could we have a line by line rundown why that's so high?
Sure. I
Like-
mean, of course, I can provide that for the next meeting for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, and then C2, Donna Cook.
Okay. I have been watching since people have been home, the animal complaints have skyrocketed. The thing of it is that I have no idea what that means. Like, is it cats? Is it dogs? Is it horses? Is it, the reason I would like to know is because would be helping with the ordinances for animals. So it would be very helpful to know what animal complaints there are and what sort of animals and what circumstances are these animals causing problems. So is there some type of a report that I could have so that I can work with the planner and the building inspector on the ordinances? They're supposed to be updated.
Donna, I don't know, this is Chris. I don't know what the 25 year-to-date animal complaints were, but I'll definitely have the AOC get a hold of you along with the chief and address the concerns that you have, and we'll get that resolved for you.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful going forward to be able to put the animal ordinances in perspective when we're writing them up. So amongst other, hopefully it's not goats again, but
I hope-
okay. All right. Thank you, Chris.
No problem. I'll get on that tomorrow.
Thank you.
And then finally, item F, the town administrator, Denise.
This is Denise. This is going out for advertisement for an RFP for professional auditing services. I just want to keep in the upfront, and I don't think that Chris knew this, the school committee would like to participate in who gets hired this year. And when I was president a couple of years ago, we said that we would discuss that. Since they do audit their books also, they felt that they would like to be a participant in the choice.
So when we open them up and make a decision, I'll invite the finance director and the superintendent, if need be, to come over and take a look along with Denise and myself.
Thank you, Chris, because they wanted me to remember this. And when I saw it on the agenda, I just thought I should mention it now.
I did in the specs note the name of the new finance director over there. If they have any questions about the school audit needs, they could contact her at the number that they have listed over there. But we would definitely bring them over to discuss the parameters of the submissions when they get submitted to us.
Thank you.
John?
John,
Madam President, I'd like to make a motion to approve items 4C, 1, 2, and F.
is there a second?
Second.
There's a second from Denise. Counselor Driggs,
Yes.
Counselor Clark. Steve is muted.
Oh.
I don't know if he's muted himself. Counselor DiMederos,
Yes.
Counselor Clark. Oh,
We have them unmuted.
Counselor Cook,
Yes.
Counselor Edwards,
Yes.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
try one more time. Counselor Clark?
Yes.
Steve? Okay, and I'm a yes. All right, moving on to public hearings. The first is approval of proposed amendment to the resolution for fines and fees to repeal the third-party billing rescue fees and replace language with usual and customary rate for area as determined by Medicare or other insurance carrier. This public hearing is continued from March the 23rd.
Madam President, so this is the public hearing portion of the agenda. We're going to go each one of these separately. Again, if there's anybody on the public who's on Zoom who would like to comment on this, they can click on under participants, attendees, and they can click raise their hand, and we will see who is raising their hand, and we will allow them to let them in at that time. If you're on the phone and not on Zoom, well, if you're on Zoom and you need to raise your hand, please, I think it's *6. So if someone, Denise, could you just press *6 for me for a second on your phone to make sure that works?
Yeah, no, that muted her.
Try
Star 6. Mike, *6 mute you.
Okay, try *7. I'm sorry.
Just don't hit end.
Did you get that?
No. We will. We'll go through each of the phone numbers and we'll allow them to speak. We'll unmute them at the time.
And just to clarify before we open up the public hearing, this is continued. This is a public hearing that would change the billing fees for rescue runs going forward, not retroactively, to be consistent with the currently published customary fees for Medicare and other insurance carriers to bring our billing in line.
*9, Denise. There you
That
go.
works.
*9. I'm sorry, *9.
*9. Okay.
The
Are there any questions from the council before we open this up for public hearings?
This is Donna. I was just wondering why the Recreation Commission is under consent agenda instead of public hearings, although it says public hearing on the.
Because Donna, it's not a public hearing. That's a request for a public hearing.
I get it. Okay, thank you.
So Madam President, I might just be able to add a little bit of information to inform the public. So the purpose of this amendment, as you said, is under the current code of ordinances, we have set our rescue reimbursement fees, and they were set quite some time ago. As you know, the town council recently awarded a bid to a new billing company, and looking at our ordinances and looking at what we were getting for reimbursement, we were way below the Medicare reimbursement rate, and we were losing money basically from insurance companies and whatnot based upon our fees. So the vendor has asked us to amend our ordinances to the language that you indicated, reflect normal, the term that you used, I'm sorry, it's escaping me right now.
Usual and customary.
Usual and customary fees, which will allow us to basically float with the Medicare rates for reimbursements in the future.
We have Chief Marlowe on the phone too. If he.
Yes. Are there any comments from the public? If anyone would like to either raise their hand or was it hit *9? *9?
We do have one person. I'm going to let them in. Phone ending in 5328.
If you could please introduce yourself.
You're muted on your phone, so.
*6.
*6 on mute.
Mute on your phone, yep.
625-5328.
Correct.
He just muted himself again.
There you go.
That's,
There you go.
it's
You're
Peter
up.
Mona's.
Yeah, it's me.
There he is.
Could you just introduce yourself?
Oh, first of all, yeah, I can introduce myself, Peter Monas. But people to participate to see if it works. So I was hitting the button. So are you talking about the bike path?
No, Peter, right now we're talking about the rescue billing fees.
Okay, so I'm just going to listen here. Okay, I'm going to go back to mute.
Okay, well, but Peter, you want to speak when we get to the bikes, right?
He's muted
Okay.
again, but yes.
Okay.
I'll
Are there-
remember to remind you.
Are there any other members of the public who would like to be heard on the rescue fees? Anyone else? You can either raise your hand if you're on video or *9 if you're on the phone.
There are no
Madam
other.
President, will we
No.
also take the Q&A piece as well if somebody punches in the Q&A? Because there's that function also.
Yes, if you're on Zoom, yes.
If you're
Okay.
on Zoom, yes, if you're on Zoom.
And at this point, I should ask the deputy clerk, Madam Clerk, were there any public comments submitted either by email or regular mail on this topic?
There were none.
Okay.
Thank you.
In that case, I'm going to close the public hearing then. Are there any comments or questions from the council? John?
I'd like to make a motion to approve. Actually, we have to go one more, don't we? We have to vote. Okay, never mind. But I'll make a motion to approve the proposed amendment to the resolution for fines and fees and to repeal the third-party billing and rescue fees and replace with language usual and customary rate for area as determined by Medicare or other insurance carrier.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. So roll call vote. Counselor Driggs?
Yes.
Counselor Perry?
Yes.
Counselor DiMederos?
Yes.
Counselor Clark?
Yes.
Counselor Cook?
Yes,
Counselor Edwards?
Yes, tell the billing
And I-
company to get that money.
There you go. And I am also a yes. Moving on to our next public hearing, which is approval of proposed amendment to Town Code of Ordinances Floodplain Management Program, Chapter 67-2, applicability language update per Rhode Island Emergency Management Agency requirements. Revisions reflect changes defined by the Newport County Flood Insurance Study Report. So essentially, there's a requirement in our zoning code that we include the specific firm maps, the flood insurance maps by reference in our zoning code. And there are new maps, new FEMA maps that have come out, and we're being asked to update our zoning code to reference those map numbers specifically.
We have Bill Moore is on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Bill, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so they made adjustments to 5 maps. So just what you said, Chairwoman, that's the changes they made and we're required to do it.
Can I ask a question of Bill Moore?
Go
Sure.
ahead, Nancy.
Did anyone, this sounds like a funny question, but I am a lawyer. Did anyone proofread and make sure that the changes that are put in there match what should be there, just so we're sure?
Yes, we did that several times and we believe it is 100% accurate now.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, since this is a public hearing, yet again, we'll ask any members of the public if they'd like to speak on this. You can either raise your hand or click the chat button if you are on Zoom with video. If you are calling in only by phone, you can hit *9 on your phone. Are there any members of the public who'd like to be heard?
I don't see any at the moment.
Anyone like to be heard on this?
Give them a few minutes. While we're waiting for that, could we ask the deputy town clerk whether or not we received any any written comments or emails on this topic?
No, there were none.
Thank you. The record should reflect that.
Any members of the public wish to be heard? Well, in that case, we'll close the public hearing. Are there?
Madam President, it's *9 if you have a phone that you want to speak, that would
Yeah.
raise your hand. Just want to give it one more shot through, just to make sure. Okay, I don't see anything.
Okay, in that case, John, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, if nobody else has anything, I'd like to make a motion to approve the proposed amendment to the town code ordinances for the floodplain management program, chapter 62-7 applicability, with the language to per Rhode Island emergency management requirements defined for the Newport County flood insurance.
There's a motion and a second from Denise. Any other discussion or questions? In that case, the roll call vote, Counselor Driggs,
Yes.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
Counselor Clark,
Yes.
Counselor DiMederos,
Yes.
Counselor Cook,
Yes.
Counselor Edwards,
Yes.
and I'm a yes too. So moving on to our next public hearing, we have the DPW Director, Rick Rogers, which is approval to submit to RIDEM, the ESS Group RIPD Small MS4 Annual Report 2019. Again, this public hearing has been continued from March 23rd. I see we have Rick Rogers with us. Rick, would you like to explain briefly?
Yes, Madam Chairwoman. Every year, ESS Group Incorporated does a RIPD's MS4 report that has to be submitted to DEM. It has been completed in its draft form. It's in a draft form simply because it awaits this public hearing and any public comments. And once that is done, we sign off and then submit with the inclusion of any public comments and submit it to DEM.
Richard, Director Rogers, we have Matt Ladewig, who helped you draft the report on as well.
Yes, hello.
Yeah. Yes, and we would like Matt to comment or point out anything as he usually does on these yearly reviews.
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, Matt, thank you.
So this is the 16th annual report that the town has submitted to DEM under the state MS4 general stormwater permit. And basically it consists of 6 different sections. One is public outreach and education, which is just what it sounds like. What are we doing to educate the public about stormwater in the town of Tiverton? The second is public participation. So this is something, what kind of activities is the public participating in to learn about stormwater or make a contribution towards the reduction of non-point source pollution in the town. The third component is illicit discharge detection and elimination. So this is detecting discharges of that are not supposed to be entering the stormwater system, such as wastewater, and then working to eliminate those. There's also 2 components that deal with development. One is construction site stormwater runoff control. Consists mainly of the plan reviews and construction and site inspections. And then there's also what it's called post-construction stormwater management for new and redevelopment. This is post-construction inspections and also O&M inspections of the stormwater controls on the sites once they've been constructed. And then finally, there's the pollution prevention and good housekeeping. This is all the stuff that the town does just to sort of keep the storm sewer system in good shape. So the street sweeping, catch basin cleaning, all of that. And actually under that item, I think, this past year, we completed a new study looking at potential stormwater mitigation projects on town-owned or controlled land. So that was something new for this last year. And through that assessment, we were able to identify 12 potential locations that are located in priority catchments or otherwise discharged to an impaired or special resource water. So these are the locations where there may be an opportunity to implement a stormwater mitigation project in the future. That will need follow-up. It's just sort of an initial cut and follow-up analysis, which could be desktop level, but at some point will probably require site visits and some sort of conceptual design to get to the next stage. But we did undertake that this past year, is trying to help the town move forward a little bit in terms of stormwater controls. Rick, do you have anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, thank you, Matt, except that basically the only thing that keeps us from going forward is funding, and we do not expect during this current coronavirus pandemic to be able to put any more funds into that.
Counselor Driggs?
I just have a general question for either Rick or Matt. What's the import of this thing that you submit? Are there certain scores that we have to read? Is there any consequence to how we can handle this?
Yeah, well, this is a requirement of operating a stormwater system as a municipality in Rhode Island. So reporting to DEM on an annual basis is a requirement of that permit.
This is Donna.
Go ahead,
I have,
Donna.
all right, I have a question, but it has to do with sand and page 20. I was looking at it and I'm just wondering, looks like the top, it says, sand and debris collected from catch basins is 460 tons and is disposed at the landfill. And then down the bottom, sweeping of streets and roads is 515 tons of debris and sand, and again, disposed at the Tiverton landfill. And I thought to myself, where's it go when we close it?
Yes, and if I may answer that, this is Rick Rogers. We
Yep.
have not determined where that would go. What would happen is that sand and any gravel that's collected would possibly be able to be used in any road construction or drainage projects that we do. Otherwise, we would have to find another outlet for that.
What would you use? What would the sand be used for? Like if you pile it up somewhere, what could you use it for? How would you get the dirt out of it? I mean, how would that work? I mean,
You could use.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, some of that. Yeah, the sand could be used. Basically, what that is mostly from the sand and salt operations that the town does during snow plowing. And the sand could be used as some bedding or cover as long as it doesn't have to meet any particular requirements. And most of our drainage projects that we do not have to have a certain sieve analysis or any gradation requirements other than they don't have anything larger than, say, 3-inch rock. And this sand would, fulfill that criteria. But we don't know at this point whether we would be using all of that in any kind of drainage projects we do. So if we do not have the capacity to use that in drainage projects, then we'd have to find another place to either store it or find an outlet for some construction company that would like that material.
Okay. All right. I guess that's up to you what's going to happen, I guess, as we go forward. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
John, this is a public hearing, but did you have a question?
No, well, my question was going to be before I ask my questions, if we're going to go to the public hearing.
Yeah,
portion first. Okay.
I'm getting there. So this is a public hearing. If any member of the public would like to speak, again, a reminder that you can hit, if you're calling in just by phone, you can hit *9 on your phone. If you're calling in via video with Zoom, you can raise your hand or click on the chat button. So is there anyone from the public who would like to be heard on this? Anybody who'd like to be heard on this?
I don't see anybody raising their hands.
I have to admit, in the years that I've been watching this, it's not really a very popular public hearing comment item, but nonetheless, okay. In that case, if there are no comments from the public, we'll close the public hearing.
Hold on, Madam, can we ask the clerk, Madam Clerk, if there's been any submission?
Oh, sorry.
Public comment?
No, there have been none.
Thank you. The record should reflect that.
In that case, is there a motion, John?
Before I make my motion, I actually have a couple questions.
Oh, go right ahead.
So my first question's on page 12 of the report. Let me scroll up here. It talks about the permits. And it says we got 50 active permits, but only 50, there had been 53 site inspections. So I believe if I read the fine print, we're supposed to do 2 per. Is that because some of those projects just haven't gotten that component yet?
Some of that is because the projects are still ongoing, and some of those are, although they require 2 technically, on some of the small ones, there's really no pre and post. They can all be done post. If something is going to be shown on the surface, John, then for instance, a rain garden or some such, and you see it, it doesn't have to have 2. Technically, you're
Okay.
supposed to do 2, but 1 is adequate.
Okay, so that's my first question. My second question is when we talk about identifying areas for future stormwater enhancements or improvements. Maybe this is because it's part of a state road, but my question was around Main Road and the discharge that comes out of Lentz Pond. We've had a number of issues over the years where basically the road floods out, and then the state's going to come in and fix it because the stormwater management there either gets gummed up or I don't know what the deal is. Maybe it's not adequate enough, but I wanted to know why that wasn't listed as one of the areas we wanted to take a look at.
I'll let Matt comment on that also if he'd like to. However, it might have been in 2019, John, it might have been in 2018. The consultant for RIDOT did contact DPW because they're doing a study of the drainage in the area of Quaker Ave, Mount Hope Ave. And we commented to them at the time that there was a need because of a failure, which RIDOT since repaired, but there was a failure to the drainage system on the Kramer or Lent Pond side of Main Road. So they are aware of that.
Okay. And then my final question is on the SRPW portion, page 26, talks about the illicit discharge detection and elimination, specifically that residents are required to hire a licensed septic inspector to determine the viability of the on-site septic discharge system in that watershed area. Should we also include mention of wastewater district and how the town has essentially farmed out our responsibility to them?
I'll let Matt comment on that also if he likes, but it is mentioned somewhere in the report that Tiverton Wastewater District has the overview of the private and public sewer.
Yeah, I think we can incorporate that if you'd like to do so.
It might make them feel happy that we've got this going on. And with that, I'll make a motion to approve the Director Rogers to submit to RIDEM and the ESS group RIPT's small MS4 annual report.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Joe Perry, second. Roll call vote. Council Perry,
Yes.
Councilor Edwards,
Yes.
Councilor Clark,
Yes.
Councilor Cook,
Yes.
Councilor Driggs,
Yes.
Councilor DiMederos,
Yes.
and I'm also a yes. Thank you, Mr. Rogers and Mr. Ladwig. And that brings us to our last public hearing item, which is the draft design study for the Mount Hope Bay Greenway project and approval to submit comments on the same and/or request project be re-included in the State Transportation Improvement Plan, which is the TIP plan, continued again, another public hearing from March 23rd, 2020. And I'd like to first begin by asking the town administrator to give us an overview of this.
So I got an opportunity to take a look at this report from VHB, who was hired on behalf of RIDOT to look at the Greenway project for the East Bay. And they did a very, very extensive job of undertaking pretty much every aspect of looking at what that bikeway would look like. They did a number of different analysis of it. They actually came up with a number of different options, whether it was rail to trail, it was rail with a trail and a shared use path. When I say they did an extensive look at this, they did a review of the relocation impacts, the consideration of bicyclists and pedestrians, the air quality, noise impacts, water quality, the national wetlands inventory, the floodplain impacts, the coastal impacts, the sea level rises, the endangered species, the National Historic Registers, the construction impacts, the visual impacts, rail impacts, and the impacts to utilities and public facilities, as well as what I consider probably the most important issue as it relates to the town would be the hazardous materials mitigation issues. And as everyone who knows where this bike path would be, there were a number of environmental impact areas that the town would be very concerned about, whether it be the Bay Street area or the residuals of the oil tank farm that were left down by the railway. So I contacted, just so you know why VHB isn't here, they were on a 3-year contract with RIDOT, and that contract ended on April 28th of all dates of this year. I spoke with Stephen Church from RIDOT, and I spoke with Tom McQueenan from RIDOT a number of times, both of them. And they had some very glowing remarks about the report, what was done, and there is a large community in this area who would like biking and pedestrian walkway along the waterfront. It's a little bit controversial with some of the homeowners, I would assume, around that area having a bikeway near their property, but this has been a project that's been ongoing for a number of years. And unfortunately, due to the state's needs for bridge infrastructure and road infrastructure, they keep scooping the money off the TIP project and doing it for some other higher priority projects. With that said, the cost estimated by VHB was about $2.9 million to construct it. There was about $500,000 in design fees. And the areas I talked to Tom Queenan and Steve Church about were the areas the town would be exposed. And that some of that comes under the new way that this TIP program would be allocated. They've changed the formulary so that new projects the design fees are absorbed by the town. They both recommended, and I agree with them, that the recommendation would be to move this forward to into the TIP project, so that they then recommend it goes to statewide planning under the TAP project, and that we would appeal under that aspect of it because this project has been on the board for so long that its consideration should be that the funding source of the federal highway or wherever the money's come from through RIDOT would absorb the cost of the engineering and the design in the beginning, as they have done for every other project that has gone to date. And if it doesn't meet muster, then the town has an option then not to continue on with it. It's a very viable project. There's a lot of people in support of it. And I think on behalf of the town, that the town should probably consider moving this forward into the TIP and explore our options through the statewide planning process.
Counselor Driggs?
So Chris, I have several questions.
Don't we have to go to public comment first, though?
Oh,
I'll just let the council, if we have some basic questions, ask them, and then we'll go to public comment pretty quickly. Go ahead, Nancy.
sorry. So my first question is, what would ultimately, assuming this goes to TIP and TAP or whatever they stand for, how much would Tiverton itself be on the books?
So the bare knuckles that from every other plan that's been put forth, the municipalities that are near the bikeways pick up the annual maintenance of maintaining the bikeways. So clearing shrubs, making sure the asphalt is maintained appropriately. And RIDOT estimates that would be about $55,000 to $60,000 a year, which is not insurmountable. It's a large number, and we'd have to figure out what to do with it when we get there. But if that was the only piece, I think that, the council would consider it to explore it and go further with it. it's the design fees that really kind of cripple us, and we would really need relief from statewide planning so the town wouldn't have to absorb that cost.
Okay, then I had just two other basic questions. One is I was a little confused by what the railroad wants. That they seem to want to connect again to Aquidneck Island. And to my knowledge, there's no bridge there anymore. Like what? So that's one question I had. And the other was, I guess that was the main one.
So I'll answer that because I had the very same question. I spoke to Tom Queenan about that. He said that this has been ongoing for about 20 years as it relates to the line itself. Because there was a period of time when the swing bridge was in there, but it was damaged so badly it could never be used. He said, because I told him the Navy had made some comments about maybe reestablishing the line, especially if the line gets from Boston to Fall River, that they may be a consideration in the future. So there are two things. The VHB recommended that the bikeway, the Greenway project, would be both a rail and trail. So that path is 47.5 feet wide. The bikeway would be 12.5 feet wide, and probably 14, depending on what kind of room they really wanted to put in. But the bikeway would not affect the railway at all. And the exposure of lifting that rail and redoing it, which would be phenomenal as far as cost go, would be borne by whoever wanted the rail back. And they would have to put in the bridge as well. That would have no bearing on the bikeway itself. They would, the only bearing it does have, which was another question I brought up, is if they were rail and bikeway together, it would have to be fenced. And I'm assuming at that point, whoever wanted the rail, it would be their obligation. And I discussed this with RIDOT. They said that you could make a good argument, whoever wanted the rail would have to pay for the fencing as well.
Okay, and the other question that went along with that is, I noticed at one point they were talking about that the railway is not right in the middle of the width of the thing. So you could, if it is rail and trail, that you could have the trail either closer to the water side or to the east side of that path.
That's true, and there might be a crossover somewhere, but there would have to be some sort of signage and those kind of things that would.
Okay. And then finally, my last question is, if you connect to the Secundit Bridge, I couldn't quite figure out where bikers go once they cross the Secundit Bridge, because there's not a bike path over there, is there?
Not yet.
Yeah, okay, all right. Those are my questions.
Chris, I do have one question.
Sure.
As the bike path would go through the Bay Street sort of area,
Correct.
has anybody done any research or given any consideration into what would happen there if it was discovered that there was contamination?
So my understanding that when we did the sewer line in that area, they did find some contamination, and that there's potential of having contamination in the area. What VHB did in their report was they recognized it, but they also stated that it would take, and both that there's about 5 different places beyond Bay Street that they would recommend additional testing, additional borings be done throughout those areas. And that again gets into who's going to be responsible to do those costs. If it's part of the design structure, then it would come in the design fees. Because you would have to know that in order to actually build the actual bikeway. So those were the concerns that I had, but they also, were very adamant that statewide planning should give us relief with that. And at such time, if they don't, the council doesn't have to pull the trigger on funding the project. So, but because it's been such a viable project for so long, and it's endeared to so many different people, I would think that it's still viable to move forward to see whether or not those funding mechanisms can be put in place to help this project move along.
Well, in that case, since this is a public hearing, why don't we open it up to the public, and then if the council has more questions or discussion afterwards. So if there are members of the public who would like to be heard on this, again, as a reminder, if you're dialing in on your phone, you can press *9 to be recognized. Or if you're on video with Zoom, you can either click on the raise your hand icon or the Q&A icon.
Well,
So would any members of the public like to be heard on this? Actually, I know there are some, so.
Peter Monis does. Trying to find his number here.
I see 2 hand raised under attendees.
Arden Smith first, Council President, and we'll get to we'll do that right now.
Mr. Smith? Mr. Smith, can you hear us?
Mr. Smith, let me see. Hang on.
He needs to unmute himself.
There you go. I got him unmuted.
Mr. Smith?
Are you hearing us?
Yes, we are. So go ahead with your comments. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been a little difficult. This is his wife, Mary Van Dura, and both of us are members of Bike Tiverton, and I'm part of a group, Paths to Progress, which is an advisory group to the governor, which represents bike and pedestrian infrastructure in our state. And I just want to thank Christopher Cotta for his comments. He's read this well, and it is a complicated issue because recently the funding has for design and engineering has been absorbed by DEM for previous bike paths, and it is not now. So the state is requiring municipalities to pay this as well as maintenance fees. But my understanding is that some of those can be stretched out over many years, but also there will be alternate sources potentially for funding the design and engineering component. So the state has a master transportation program that's going to be released, a design for the next 20 years and a bike mobility program. And we are a candidate bikeway on that. So we are really on the state's radar. They want to do this. We're going to connect potentially to Newport and then up through Fall River and all of these places. And it will be a wonderful amenity for Tiverton because it will provide health benefits. Economic benefits. And I know people have concerns about bike paths and maybe they're going to bring crime down and stuff, but that is not a realistic expectation because typically bike paths reduce crime rates and they're just wonderful things to add to our town. So I just want to say that we're working on this, the group I'm with, constantly to try to figure out how to enable municipalities to make these projects happen. And this is a very expensive project. It's like $3 million for our town, which we would not pay, but we do have to now fund the engineering and design component potentially. But there are alternate funding sources, and we're working very hard to find avenues through potentially an infrastructure program at the federal level and such. So I just want to say, just stick with this. It's been a long haul, and I hope we can, make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter Monis? Mr. Monis?
Yes, hello. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Peter, can you just introduce yourself for everybody?
Okay, Peter Monis.
Peter, go ahead.
You want the address? I can give you the address too if you want.
That's okay, Peter.
Okay. Well, Chris Carter answered some of my questions and some of the points I was going to refer to you guys, but definitely that information he gave is very important. But I do have some other points I'd like to bring out. First of all, we agree, which is I'm associated with the bike Tiverton too, and the right-of-way, the railroad right-of-way is quite wide enough to accommodate a railroad service and a bike path. But as a bike path, there should be no conflict putting it in there. But the railroad right-of-way for train service now has been neglected by the state of Rhode Island for many years, at least 20 years since they took over the property, because that property is owned by the Rhode Island DOT. Of course, there's been overgrowth of vegetation and trees which causes blockage for the drainage, and that causes flooding. And then they have neglected the encroachment of the neighborhood people onto the property, which is has caused some problems for the railroad service, especially when the railroad tracks itself was covered over with rocks and dirt, especially down by the village of Mount Hope Bay. So the train service is not really been being talked about now or near future, but we do want to keep it open for the long-term preservation for maybe a potential service to Newport or Boston if that ever occurs. So that point was sort of covered by Mr. Carter too. But looking at the report by VHP, the consultant, they gave us some alternates, and one concern I have about the alternate is using Riverside Drive from the Mount Hope Bay Village area down Riverside and then up back to the bridge. One point is the legality of that alternative option. Who owns that property? Basically, it's the Newport Restaurant Group now. They get together. The state of Rhode Island and DOT and the town will have to get involved with the legalities for ownership, maintenance, and et cetera. But my point is they should design the property for a railroad, a bike path from Fall River Line all the way up to the bridge to Evans Avenue. Use the section that is basically from the Mount Hope Bay Village to Evans, which they didn't mention in their options. Of course, that area has been environmentally in a poor condition, like which I mentioned before about the flooding. So, and then there's another factor too, by using Riverside as the long-term rise in sea levels. And that's a big section of that down by Riverside will be flooded over maybe in 20 or 30, 40 years. So they should really concentrate on using the whole railroad right away. And the main factor to use that too is it's going to be a complete off-the-road bike path and walkway. And that's the most safest option to have for a bike path. If we go back down the Riverside Drive, we have to contend with traffic and very limited availability for right-of-way for cars and bikes and people walking, which is going to be very dangerous. The safest way and the best way is to use the whole right-of-way. And we should, as a town, should promote that option. And in the evaluation of the railroad right away again by the consultant, they said there's a couple of pinch points, which is one is the overpass at Mount Hope Bay Village. Since there's not going to be a rail service for many, many years, that pinch point is not a problem. And the other pinch point they mentioned, which is a narrow section of the railroad right-of-way, is down by Evans, and that's sufficient enough space for a bike lane there. So those 2 points are very moot. And just to mention a few things about the follow-up on questions brought by the council, the layout of the tracks is basically in the center of the right-of-way. So it's no problem there about the location of the bike path. And basically it should be, again, if you look at it, the engineering-wise of the property view of it, the track should be on the east side of the the lane should be on the east side of the tracks, because on the west side, at the base side, there's very limited space in certain sections due to erosion from the bay itself. And another point about concern about pollution down in Bay State area, I don't believe those industries, the hat factory and et cetera, that were polluting in that area, dumped contaminants, toxic waste on the railroad tracks. So there shouldn't be any problem down there for that concern. And basically, that's my points of view about this study, design study, and it should move ahead, I hope, because it's a really super asset for the state of Rhode Island, and mostly a lot of the people in the north end of Tiverton will really appreciate this and enjoy it. It's in their neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Other members of the public, are there any other raised hands or *9 on the phone?
Is it Paul Troyer? Hang on a second. Paul? Hang on, let me unmute him. Paul?
Oh.
Paul?
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Thanks for the opportunity. I'm calling on behalf of the people from the association here at Mount Hope. That's the View of Hope Association. There's 12 houses in here. We have a lot of concerns. Our basic concern to begin with is safety. We have had on many occasions a problem with fires along the beach, with drug paraphernalia being left on the beach, with broken bottles along the beach. And this is without a bike path. This is just crossing over the railroad track for fishing and enjoyment. Who's going to police this area? We have automobiles, we've had cars, we've had trucks. My daughter had to call the police a year or two ago when we were out of the country, and to verify who has a right of way to drive along this area. They're driving a truck along the railroad tracks. And the police were down and said, you know, we have the no mini bike signs up. No one pays attention to them. They do what they want. We have 4x4s. We have motorcycles. We have garbage. We have animal droppings, pet animal droppings that no one bothers to pick up. You know, and you know, we try to keep the place as neat as possible. And there's my animal speaking about it as well. Can you hold on 1 second? I'll be right back. About this time every night, we have coyotes and gophers running around the yard here. Sorry about that. The other concern is, you know, access. In the past, we've had people on our property. We have property on both sides of the railroad track. We put signs up, no trespassing, please use the other paths. And it's all ignored. They do whatever they feel like doing. They leave their trash. It's a problem. And, you know, this is without a paved path. So once you pave this path from Bay Street to the bridge, it's just going to multiply the problems. You know, and so people are concerned, and rightfully so. And I've spoken to many people along the track here. The town was good enough to come down and do some clearing last year. They had some maintenance problems along there. And I spoke to a lot of the people who live along the tracks, and, you know, it's going to impact our properties quite a bit. And we pay fairly good taxes down here to the town. And, you know, we want to know what the protections are going to be for the people who live here. So those are some of the concerns, you know, and we'll be voicing more of those. And if we decide to petition, who do we petition? Do we petition the town? Do we petition the state? To let them know that there are concerns, or, you know, even maybe making it a nature trail rather than a paved bike path, because that's a problem, no matter how you look at it, whether it's economic, you know, as far as economies go, you know, there were no businesses, Tiverton businesses along that line. There's no place for someone to spend some money here in Tiverton. What are we doing? We're putting a bike path in so people from one end of the state can cut off, or from a state next door to come and use our property and basically abuse it. So those are some of the concerns, and I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who has raised their hand or hit *9 on their phone?
So,
Mr. Solicitor, is there anybody else?
yes, there's a Horton Smith. Hang on just a second.
No, I think
We've already
they've
heard,
spoken. They've spoken already. Unless it's
Horton
a,
Smith?
yes, that actually, Mr. Smith's wife, Mary Bandura,
That's right.
spoke then.
Yeah, I'll just be brief. I mean, we'd be happy to meet with Mr. Troya and anybody else who is
Sorry.
better to the path. What?
Okay.
Sorry? Can you hear me?
Yep.
And to discuss these issues because they are common issues with establishing a bike path in a town. And I know people have fears about that, but there's actually, you know, more problems with the derelict pathway, you know, with rail lines than there are with bike paths. Really improve the condition of the town and do not cause excess crime. So we would be happy, more than happy, to discuss any of this with anyone who's interested. And we've reached out to members of this community, and I hope that we can continue that conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there, Mike, are there anybody else who's raised their hand or any other members of the public wishing to speak?
Any submitted comments?
Jeannie?
There were none.
There were none. Okay, in that case.
can we just do just one last time? If anybody wants to put their hand up, please do so now, or call in. Just give them a few seconds.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I have a question?
Sure.
My husband is trying to do the *9 and he can't get through. Can we just talk here, or is that not allowed?
That's fine. That's good.
Here,
Okay. Not to confuse things, but my name is John Perkins, not Nancy Driggs.
Okay.
And I've walked down that thing, that area. It just seems to me that we're overlooking the physical environment of those tracks that exist. The idea that we're going to just put a paved path right next to them, you can hurt yourself, especially now when you've got big thorns growing all over the place. But 1 minute you have what seems like just land, another minute you have rails, another minute you have rotten ties. I think we're overlooking.
This is by the Mount Hope Bay.
This is going down along Mount Hope Bay down to Evans Avenue. I think we're overlooking something that is part of the equation that needs to be looked at.
Okay. I don't see.
Is there anybody else who's raised their hand?
No, Madam Chair.
In that case, we'll close the public hearing. Questions and comments from the council, Councilor Edwards?
Thank you. So a couple questions here. Maybe the first one could be answered by the administrator. Is there a way that we can get a copy of the actual report that was done beyond just the memorandum that was sent out?
We received 2 reports. I have one, actually. I gave it to Mike. I don't know where the other one went to.
If we get a soft copy or something, I don't know if they've been
I'll see if
scanned
we
in
can have
somewhere.
it. It's pretty voluminous, and the foldouts of the maps, what the problem are. I was gonna see if I could get a CD from DOT. That might be easier.
Either that or a PDF version or something from VHB. I mean, they're the ones who made it right. So since you've read it, obviously the question that I have, because we've got a sewer main that runs down there, is, you know, would any of this impact access for the sewer main? Because that is still property of the town, and we have to maintain that until eventually one day we can hopefully kick that over to wastewater's responsibility. But then again, it becomes their issue.
So the sewer issue never came up in the report that I could find. So I'm assuming that is on separate land. Or they have a,
Goes through that right away.
That I couldn't find anything in the report for it.
Okay, so that was question number one. And number two, is, and I haven't seen a newer report since 2014, but the Rhode Island had a state rail plan. And I'm looking at this one, and it actually talks about future passenger rail products, between service of Aquidneck Island and Tiverton.
Yep.
So obviously, if the state's got this on their list, that's something that the state's at least thought about. And I know there's a big push, nationally for expanded, commuter rail and passenger rail line service. So that may be something that's closer than we actually think.
So I did speak to Rideout about this. For a number, I heard it from a different aspect. I heard it actually from the Navy, that there was consideration, not in the immediate future, but in the not so distant future, that they'd be looking to putting the line back in to support the Navy Yard. But being that the state owns the property that they've taken over from Old Colony, I think there are like 3 different rail lines that had ownership to it. The state DOT says that they don't have any immediate need to put a line in, and that they weren't looking at it. And every time somebody brings it up, it really doesn't go anywhere because there are much higher priority issues in the state to deal with bridges and roads than there are with rail. So it's not anywhere near high on their priority list right now. As it relates to the TIP program, it still is pretty high for the bikeway, but they haven't considered it to be part of the TIP program to add rail to it. So there is a little bit of confusion there, but I agree that the state should probably be maybe a little bit more forthcoming about what they anticipate for future plans, like in a time frame, like even if it's 20 years out, is it something that we're looking at over the next 15, 20 years?
I don't even necessarily know that it might be a state function. It may be even a function, where it comes down from on high from the federal government. So that's, we've all seen the national news, it started with that whole, Green New Deal and pushing, infrastructure projects like this. I mean, if the federal government tomorrow, with everything that's going on, decides to, write another, $4 trillion check to go do infrastructure projects, this could shoot up the list pretty quickly.
Good.
So that was my only comments.
Oops. Thank you, John. Councilor Driggs.
I was just struck by something Peter Troya said, and I hadn't looked at it this way, but we used to live in Bristol, which has a bike path, but it ends in town. So I think it sort of benefited the local business people. People would bike in from East Providence, Barrington, wherever they came from, but there would be a destination, and they probably spent some money in town. And this one sort of goes nowhere. And in a bizarre way, are we inviting people, to come up and just sort of end up in Tiverton on the beaches around the Saconnet Bridge? Or I don't know. That just something about that hit me, that I don't know what the invitation that we're holding out is and what the effect of that'll be. And I don't really know where I'm going with that. It just struck me.
Councilor Edwards, you wanted to say something else?
Yeah, sorry, just to back up Councilor Driggs's comments. When I lived on Randolph Ave before we moved, there's a small beach at the bottom of Last Street, all the way at the bottom of the hill, and walking down there, you have to cross private property to get to it. And luckily, the gentleman was kind enough to let us go down there. But every time I went down there, I was always struck by the amount of litter and debris that was left by people who were coming down there to fish. So I don't know to what impact that's going to impact the ability of people to even have access to the waterfront, to go down there and utilize the waterfront. That's been a consideration that we've had around some of our other areas in town, and then B, what we're going to do about litter control as well, because obviously we can't have people littering on the shore, and it's happening now, and there's no enforcement.
Any other counselors like to comment?
This is Donna.
Go ahead,
I'm
Donna.
just really concerned with the $500,000 design fee. Could someone go over that again? Who's going to pay for that?
So Donna, let me see if I can explain this the way that was explained to me properly. So right now, under the new plans of the TIP programs for bikeways, the local communities are required to pick up the design fees. The RIDOT staff that I talked to about this project, because this has been on, I believe would be going on its 3rd TIP program, and I think they're 4-year cycles. So it's already been on a TIP program for in excess of 8 years. And when it first started in these programs, the design fees were paid for by DEM. RIDOT believes it would be prudent to ask the statewide, because once it gets on the TIP plan, it can't go anywhere if it doesn't get on the TIP plan. But if it does get on the TIP plan, it then needs to go to strategic planning, the statewide process to get on the overall master plan, which is the TAP program, the transportation alternate projects. But it's the master program of all these projects. And it would be there through statewide planning that we would appeal as a community to apply to have those design fees paid for by the state. And if the state at that time said no, that it would still be on the community, the town can then vote at that point in time to say, well, this is a nice project, but quite frankly, we can't afford $500,000 in design fees, so we're not going to go forward.
Okay.
So there's no obligation at this point by putting it on the tip.
Anyone else?
Yeah. Can I say one more thing, Tricia?
Sure, Donna.
I am, although when I was a candidate, I was asked about if I like bike paths, and who doesn't like a bike path. I called Bristol, Warren, and they didn't keep any statistics on crime. So that made it kind of difficult. No one seems to be keeping any statistics on crime. And I think Mr. Troya has some real concerns, and he is a property owner. And it is down there very out of the way. It seems to be very different than Bristol or Warren, which seems to kind of run through areas of the town that you can stop and have ice cream and various other things like that. And seems to be more in plain view. It even goes through Colt State Park. This seems to be very isolated. I'm kind of concerned with that. Who is going to watch out, police the area? Who's going to take people's concerns down there as they're calling that they might have a problem? I know, there's been several comments that there didn't seem to be a problem with crime, but then there's no statistics for me to look at. So how do I assess what we're putting ourselves into with a out of the way bike path that really no one's going to see? It's not near Main Road. It's not near anything. It's just very far away from anything. There's nothing to look at. The only other thing that I have noticed in a positive note is that it does seem to increase the value of the homes as far as people actually putting when they're going to sell their home that they are near the bike path. So they must see it as a positive thing. So I'm kind of in the middle here, the money, the possible crime, not crime, no statistics to look at. And I think kind of limited information, except that, there's lovely letters and whatnot, but I don't live down where Mr. Troya lives. So I have to take his word for it. Apparently there's a problem down there. How many people are going to call that are down there? He's the only one that called. So the only other person that complained was Randy LeBeau. He doesn't live in town anymore, and he felt so strongly about it. It appears that he moved out and didn't even want to take a chance that it would be down there. So I don't know how many people felt the same as Randy or Mr. Troya. I'm sure they like biking, but it is their property and they have to live this. Their quality of life will be very impacted. So I'm kind of concerned with that. And once again, I like bike paths. I use them all the time, but I do have to consider the quality of life for residents down there. So that was just my point.
From the other counselors, Joe or Denise or Steve, do you have a comment?
Trish,
Go ahead, Denise.
as I'm listening to Donna talk, and I was listening to the neighbor that lives down there, has the police chief weighed in on this? Because are there reports of crime down there? Are they going down there a lot? And has he weighed in to what kind of difficulties this might cause?
I haven't asked them, and I don't believe that they've been weighed in, and that they probably wouldn't have been asked until the council decides they want to go forward with the design.
I think it's a really good idea that we get some kind of comment from him to see how he would feel about patrolling that area, and of course about what's going on there right now. I do think it's going to bring more people into that area, so I am concerned on what's going to happen down there, and I do believe the neighbors do have a valid concern.
Any, Steve or Joe?
Yeah, this is Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is an interesting topic. There's a lot of pros and cons that have been highlighted tonight. And I just want to make sure that right now we're kind of debating whether we want it or not. But at this point, all we're really trying to approve is getting it back on the SIP plan with no financial commitment at this point. So, I think we can vote on that and keep this thing moving, or at least keep it alive. But at some point, these issues that have been brought up are going to have to be probably looked at more closely, and I'm sure it's going to be a hot topic. My only thoughts is that I think it is kind of an odd area for a bike path, because you come off the Secana Bridge and there's you go into what is it, Evans Ave there, and the thing from VHB here says, well, we can reline that. Well, that road's pretty narrow already, so I don't know how relining it would make that a viable way to get from the bridge down to where the railroad right of way is. So that probably needs more design work. I'm also concerned that it goes up to Fall River and then it just ends at the line, and again, based on the report here, in the vicinity of a sewage treatment plant. So it's got me scratching my head about the location. As far as the crime goes, it's hard to say. We're all speculating. By having more traffic down there, foot traffic and bike traffic, maybe the crime goes away, because now, there's more eyes and people going through there, walking their dogs, and that might cause the less law-abiding people to stay away from that area. So I don't know. I'm speculating too. I just want to make sure that we're just voting here to keep this thing alive by getting it on the STIP plan, and that we're not making any financial commitment right now. Can somebody affirm that for me?
I can affirm that. That would not, putting it on the tip would not cost the town anything, and it would give us more time to study it and to ask for relief from statewide planning. There's no obligation at all on behalf of the town, according to both Mr. Queening and Mr. Church from RIDOT.
So I tend to agree with the point that Steve made, which is, for tonight, all we're being asked to do is whether or not we want to, let this take the next step forward. And for all the issues that have been raised, and they're very good issues that would need to be resolved. And whether or not they're all resolvable or not, I don't particularly know. But my guess is that from the sounds of it, if this even goes onto the TIP plan, the town would probably have at least 4 more opportunities to say yay or nay before this actually happened. And there are a lot of ifs there as to whether or not statewide planning would be willing to eat $500,000 in design fees. And then there are questions about who's going to be responsible for any contaminated soil and the maintenance, and at every step of that discussion, the town would have the opportunity to weigh in. So I'm not opposed right now, even though, I have see things about it that sound wonderful, but then I see concerns. But I don't see any harm in letting it go to the next step because we're so far away as a town from making a commitment here. We're only, being willing to let the process be investigated. That's kind of where I am. John, you have your hand up. John,
Yeah, you asked me to unmute my microphone. I was going to do it anyways. No, based on everything that's been said, I mean, I would like to make a motion to submit this to the STIP program.
Can I make one more comment before we move to a vote? It's just something I thought about, actually. John mentioned it, that can we make it clear that if we do vote to move forward to get onto the tip thing, that it's very clear that we have not committed and will not yet commit to any money being spent. I don't want it to be like
well, it's not, that's not how it, that's inherent in the vote that we're taking just by the process. We don't need to.
I just hope it. I hope it,
to add anything to it. It's inherently built into the process that we are not making a commitment in any sort of financial or permanent way here. We're only allowing it to, go to the next step for consideration.
Good. I just want that clear.
Marcelo is nodding his head. So there's a motion. Is there a second for tonight?
I'll second it.
Second, Steve Clark.
Okay, there's this 2 seconds, one from Joe and one from Steve. So I'll do a roll call vote. Joe Perry,
Yes.
Steve Clark,
Yes.
Nancy Driggs,
Yes.
John Edwards,
Yes.
Donna Cook,
Yes.
Denise DiMatteo,
Yes.
and I'm a yes too. Thank you, everybody. Moving on to the town council sitting as a board of licensing, we have a private detective license renewal for Charles Mulcahy of 65 Beech Avenue, Tiverton. And I think you should have in your packet Mr. Mulcahy's application, and this is a renewal. I'll just check, Jeannie, is there anything the town clerk has all the appropriate necessary information for this renewal?
Yes, I was told that everything is in order.
And we also have the background check signed by the Tiverton Police Department and the insurance certificate. John.
So I feel like I've been involved in at least 3 renewals for this particular individual. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to approve the private detective license renewal for Charles Mulcahy, 65 Beech Avenue, Tiverton, Rhode Island.
Second.
And we have many seconds. So roll call vote. Counselor Driggs,
Yes.
Counselor Edwards,
Yes.
Counselor Perry,
Yes.
Counselor DiMaderis,
Yes.
Counselor Cook,
Yes.
Counselor Clark,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. So renewed. Moving on to general business, the next item is council ratification of Tiverton Executive Order 2020-10, further continuing the date of the Tiverton Financial Town Referendum from the 3rd Saturday in June, which was June 20th, 2020, to a date no later than 65 days after the fiscal year 2021 state budget is enacted into law. I think we talked about this a fair amount at the last council meeting where we were, and I know that Chris sent an email out to everyone letting us all know that we still do not have a very good handle on what our appropriation from the state is going to be this year. Yesterday, the revenue estimating conference finished up, and you probably heard on the news that between the last quarter of this year and next year, the state is contemplating an $800 million revenue shortfall, which is pretty significant. So in discussing this with Chris, who's who's, been on these many phone calls, as well as the town solicitor, and there's a finance subgroup. And I believe that they're also talking to members from the legislature. The thought was that, again, rather than trying to wing it on a budget with revenue estimates that we don't have any idea, we've been advised that the General Assembly is going to go back in June at some point to set a budget for the state. They're going to have to, at which point we would have revenue estimates, and the budget committee could take those and go to work, and then still have enough time to do the correct process for the FTR. And I'll ask Chris and Mike to join in here, as they've been primarily on these phone calls and in these discussions.
So this is Chris from the House Finance Committee. Will be starting, I believe, I think the middle of next week. They're going to come back and I'm not sure how they're going to do it. I don't know if they're going to do it via Zoom or some sort of remote access way of doing it. But they are going to start contemplating on how to put the state budget together, which would include all municipal revenues as well that they allocate. So that would be the first step in the process. I do know in discussion with some of the representatives that there is concern about the residual amount of CARES money that might still be available. And they're working with the federal delegation to see if there's any possibility of having any portion of that $1.25 billion that doesn't get spent on direct COVID-related issues. Could that be utilized in the state somehow for some sort of relief? That piece has not yet to be determined. And they are working very diligently on trying to effectuate that. And there's also the fourth iteration of federal relief that may be coming, but it may not be coming as quickly as we would like to see it, which is an option that the state will be wrestling with as well. And then Mike and I are also working diligently with our local reps to try to get a meeting with our representatives from the Lottery Commission to finally pin down this gaming shortfall that we have. That date has yet to be determined, but I've been promised it will be this week. So we're, these are all numbers and all issues that we're trying to resolve appropriately so that we can put together a much more stable budget. It may not be perfect when even have all these numbers, but it will be a better attempt than what we have today. So I don't know if Mike has anything to weigh in, but.
No, I think that covered it nicely. I really don't have anything to add.
Councillor Cook, or I'm sorry, Councillor Driggs had your hand up.
Yeah, I have a couple of things and I'll just say them and you can address them as you want. My first question, literally on the exec, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, I don't know what happened to my video. That's weird. Hold on, I must have hit something. Okay, my first question is sort of a technical one, but I noticed, and I don't know if it's a fatal flaw, but it is very confusing. On the executive order itself, the paragraph 1 indicates that it's moved from June, I'm literally reading it, June 20, 2020 to a Saturday no later than 6590, parentheses, 65 days. And
that was corrected before it was published on that was the first draft that we put up on the website, but it has been corrected. It is 65 days, 65 with the number.
Right. Well, I don't have that, which brings me to the second issue, and I don't know what to do about this, but it really bothers me, and I know it bothers Councilwoman Cook because we've talked about it. And especially in light of the fact that our own agenda refers to people looking to the Tiverton Town Council governance policy. This is now the second time where our governance policy is not being followed in terms of including the town council in discussions dealing with this kind of an issue. Clearly, it was not something that had to be done immediately. And there would have been time to schedule a meeting, which is what our town council policy 7A calls for, that if time and circumstances permit, the whole town council, who is the governing body of the town, should be involved. And I don't know, it's very, it's just wrong. I think we're really just messing around with the laws we have to follow here, and that bothers me. So that's out there, and I'd like somebody to address it, because I don't know if it bothers the other council people, but I do think it's very bizarre that we're still elected. We're here to represent people. We're here to be a sounding board. We're here to participate, and we're not being included in any of this. It's like right now our town is being run by the president, the vice president of the town council, Chris Cotta, and Solicitor Marcello, and I don't think that's right. And then the other issue I have, in the whereas clauses of the executive order, it makes reference to the fact that there's a restrictions on gathering of 5 or more people, which would make a public hearing. We're having a public hearing right now. that you can have public hearings without all being in the same room. And the requirements for people who have to participate in the financial town hearing are somebody from the budget committee, somebody from the town council, and somebody from the school committee. Those are the 3 required participants. So I do not think it would be impossible to have a budget hearing under the current restrictions. So those are my, and I have some other issues that I want to talk about, but maybe it's, I don't know when's appropriate. I mean, I had written about some questions about tax levies and the casino revenue, and maybe that comes in when Solicitor Marcello talks about it. But in terms of this executive order, those are my 3 concerns, and I guess one's been fixed, although I never knew it. So anyway, that's where I am. But I am very concerned about the governance policy, that we're not following it, and I don't understand why.
Solicitor Marcello.
Thank you. So let me address the last point first. The 5-person limit. There is currently a 5-person limit on public gatherings. And for public hearings, based upon the information that I was told by the town administrator and the council president, generally your public hearings for a budget, generally we get between 45 and 55 people turn out for that public hearing. The issue has been brought up on these calls, whether the Department of Health, the town was looking for guidance from the Department of Health, whether they would sign off on allowing of meetings of that type for budget processes, specifically for financial town meetings and for financial town referendums. Last week, we were told by the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns that they got formal notification from the Department of Health, and we all asked for a formal letter from them indicating that they would not sign off on the propriety or the safetiness of such a meetings. So therefore, that I hope that answers that question. Now,
no, it doesn't. It doesn't.
Let me finish.
It doesn't, because why can't you have it by Zoom is my question.
Okay, that's a good point, and I was getting to that. The other issue with Zoom is we might be able to have it with Zoom, but there's issues of whether or not there's an issue of disenfranchisement, whether or not you have people who can participate, who have internet access, who might have a computer. There are a lot of different issues that have been raised by that. None of them are perfect. What we're doing now, I get it. We're doing the same thing now, but we're talking about a town budget, which was sets a tax rate. And I believe the standard is higher, especially when your charter requires such a public hearing or gathering. So that's, I know you're shaking your head, but that's a real legitimate concern that has been raised. And whether or not how you verify that someone who's on Zoom is a member of the town and all those kind of difficult issues. So I get it. I know you disagree with that, but that's kind of where we are. I hope that answers your question. As far as
yeah,
does that answer your question, or does it not?
It's not a satisfactory answer, but I hear you, and I don't know where else to go with it. It just strikes me, when we used to have the financial town meetings, we had people, and people would show up and they'd be in a separate room, you know, with a microphone, and that's how they heard it. I mean,
I understand. There really is a question about whether you jeopardize public health by having such a gathering, a public hearing like that. And again, the Department of Health will not sign off on such a thing. I guess if the town wanted to go forward with it, they could. But I don't really, I mean, that's a decision for you that the council would have to make, whether they want to go forward with a public hearing of that nature where there's a gathering.
I agree with you on that for the health issue right now. What I'd like to see us going forward on is a possibility of not having a public gathering, but having some kind of a situation where there is an electronic way to do it so that the health isn't at risk, but we can accomplish the same thing. And my other
Sorry, hold
concern.
on. Let me just finish with that response. And by delaying this, we may be in a better spot. We may be able, they may allow a gathering of 50, of public, or they may offer some clarification as whether a Zoom would be sufficient under different circumstances. So we're waiting for that guidance, and hopefully by doing this, we're buying some time. Let me address the executive order because this has come up numerous times, and I just want to make it very clear. The town has already declared a municipal emergency. As you know, once the municipal emergency is cleared, that empowers the chief executive officer of the town to take certain actions. And I gave you an extensive memo indicating that Ms. Hilton is the chief executive officer of the town by a policy and a program that was approved by previous town councils. Now, as far as participation, once that executive order is signed, as a matter of law, that empowers Ms. Hilton to issue executive orders as she has done in this case. She has no requirement for the council to approve her executive orders once they're taken. However, out of abundance of caution, and in fairness to the rest of the other elected members, she has brought you this executive order for ratification. She is under no obligation to do so, but I would suspect that if the town council tonight were not to ratify this executive order, she would immediately withdraw it. So to suggest that there is no participation by this council till after the fact is not accurate, because this is your chance. This is the other members of the town council can now weigh in on this, and you will weigh on it, and you already have, and you've done so in the past. So that's where we are. So I want to make it very clear. There's nothing illegal happening here. This is a state law that we're acting under. This is which trumps your policy. We keep on saying that you have this town council policy, and I'm assuming that Ms. Hilton, I let her speak for herself, did consult with the council vice president before she put this order in. But that's a policy of the town, and the policy of the town is trumped by the fact that this town council has already voted back in March to declare a municipal emergency. That's the status we're under. We are now issuing executive orders under that municipal emergency, which Ms. Hilton has done for the second time. And for the second time, she's bringing back forward, even though she's under no obligation to do so, she's bringing you that executive order today for a vote, for discussion. And again, if the majority of this council were to vote not to go forward with this executive order and moving the FTR again, I'm not going to speak for Ms. Hilton, but based upon my conversations with her, she would not be moving it. She would withdraw it, and we'd be back to the June 20th date.
I hear you.
Hey, Nancy, could you let somebody else?
I would like to say something.
Donna, could you hold on a second? John, did you have your hand up or no?
I would like to say something else.
Not yet, so you can let everybody else go.
Well, I have my hand up, but of course you can't see it.
Okay, Donna, go ahead then, and then Denise.
Yeah.
Donna, go ahead.
All right. I'm going to come from a different angle. It's not that I don't know what your job is, Tricia. And it's not that I don't understand the original first order. It's just that at the time, I thought that since there has been a lot of time and circumstances to talk to the town council before one was signed, I just thought it would be done that way. I have found that it has not, and it's been very disappointing. I have been in town. I have been willing and able to do last minute meetings or have discussion. I never relinquished or felt that I forfeited my responsibilities to perform my duties, and I've been willing and available for input into the executive orders during the pandemic. So it's not that I'm trying to be difficult to deal with. I just feel that I'm never asked. I
Okay,
find out after.
I would like to answer this. Did we or did we not all have it as a council, a very long discussion about this at our last council meeting 2 weeks ago? Did we not, where Chris went through all the revenue? We had a big discussion about this. We talked about the possibility of having to move the FTR. I mean, I was there. We all had this discussion at the last council meeting, correct?
You already had the signature done.
No, Donna, that's just not true. There was nothing then. Do you remember having this big conversation about the status of the revenue, the status of the state revenue, what we didn't know, what we did know? Chris went through everything, and we discussed the possibility. The words actually were discussed of the possibility of having to move the FTR again.
All
were
right.
at that
I
council,
get that.
correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay, you were there. And then did you receive the memo that Chris sent out?
Yes.
He sent a
But
couple.
it was while you were he said you were going to come in the afternoon and you were going to sign the memo. So it's like when I got it, you were already going to sign it. I wasn't allowed to take part in any of it. I've been in town. I haven't gone anywhere. It's just a difference of opinion. It's how I feel. I feel that as a counselor that this whole time has been really disappointing. And I have been here to do my job and I haven't been allowed to. So I'm not going to change my opinion, and it's just the way it is.
At the Monday meeting last week, if you had an objection to the possibility of having to, that was the big discussion at the council meeting. I didn't hear you say that once. So Denise, go ahead. Speak.
All right. First of all, I want to reiterate what Trish said. During the meeting 2 weeks ago, we had a lengthy discussion. And at that point, I didn't really get that the majority of the town council did not agree that we should postpone this meeting. Trish does call me and tell me what she's going to do, but quite frankly, as Mike said, she does not have to do that. And we are here tonight to ratify it. And I think Mike is correct with his conclusion that if we voted not to ratify this, then we'd have to think of some other solution. I think that the argument here is procedural on how this is being handled, but it's not really looking at the actual facts. There is no way that we can have a town referendum on June 20th. It would be irresponsible June 20th. It would be irresponsible of us. We have no idea of what we're getting from the state. We have no idea how our revenue is coming in right now. And to actually ask the budget committee to go forward and propose a budget is wrong. And I don't think that's what we're arguing about here. We're arguing whether or not Trish has the power to do this. State law trumped the town governance. When we voted to declare a state of emergency, we gave Trish the power to do this. We also gave the town the power to get funds that are coming in from the government. And that's why we did it. But I really don't think that the argument here is that we disagree with Trish's decision. I think it's certain people thinking that Trish is taking her power that she doesn't have, which is absolutely wrong. It's absolutely wrong.
Can I ask a question? Why are you consulting?
Hang on, Nancy. Nancy, hold on. I'm trying to make sure everybody has a chance. Joe, did you want to say something or were you just moving your thing? Joe? Is Joe muted?
I was just moving something, Trish.
Oh, okay. I think we discussed at the last council meeting when we discussed this and we talked about making, whether or not we need to make this decision. Chris stated then that there were 2 more finance meetings that were going to happen that week. There was going to be one, there were 2 more, and that would give us a better idea at the end of the week whether or not those, whether or not there was enough information, we were going to have enough to be able to go forward. At the same time, the budget committee had a deadline of May 7th. So if we were going to move this and still preserve the budget committee's right to come back and work on that budget, in other words, their deadline wouldn't have passed, then we had to do this by May 7th. Otherwise, we would have left the budget committee in a position where someone could have challenged them in court that they didn't have a right to go back and work on the budget. So, this potential string of events and timing all got laid out to everybody. It was all laid out to everybody. And no one objected when we talked about this. At the last council meeting, no one objected and said, well, absolutely not. That's not what happened. And everybody had the same information. And frankly, I think Chris has done an outstanding job of keeping you all updated. How many emails and updates has everybody gotten from Chris on this? Quite a few. He's let everybody know every step of the way where we stand in terms of what information we have and what information that we don't have. So, I'm not exactly sure what you want. And no matter what, even having meetings, even if we try to, there's still a 48-hour notice requirement. You've still got to get a quorum together. And, we discussed this at our last meeting.
And this thing was signed on May 5th. It's now May 11th. There could have been a meeting before it was signed. I just want to say a couple of things. I think I hear and I understand Mike, the solicitor's argument about your role as president in an emergency. I think there's a difference between an emergency order that is an emergency or a decision that is made during the course of an emergency. And I look at this as a decision that it's being made as a course of the emergency. And that my guess is you are calling Denise. I mean, why are you calling Denise and nobody else? If you're not.
Well, because I'll tell you why, because the charter requires me to. The charter specifically states that if there's a decision that has to be made, that you have to, the charter says that I
think it's the governance policy that says it.
No, the charter actually says it.
And the governance policy says the same thing, but also says time and circumstance.
As the solicitor just told you, the charter changed the governance policy, and the governance policy.
The other two things
let me finish. You brought up a question. Let me answer it, please. The town charter requires that if a decision is made, that the council president must consult with the council vice president, which I have done, as well as had numerous decisions or discussions with the town administrator and the town solicitor, who are really at this point closer to the discussions that are going on at the state level. And I go back to my point. We discussed this as a discussion item at the last council meeting. We discussed the possibility that this was going to happen. We talked about the dates that Chris had with meetings going forward, that if we didn't have enough information for the budget committee to create a budget, we'd be doing this again. And so, we've done it. For now, what I'm asking is whether or not the council wants to ratify that decision. John has his hand up.
Thank you. So I'll be brief. I've only got 3 points. Number one, as it pertains to this FTR and the budgeting process, I know it's been bandied about town that we're sitting on this supposed stockpile of money, this $4.5 million, whatever it is. And I want to make it very clear that we as a town spend like $50 million a year, and our burn rate on cash, that would only give us what? A couple of weeks, right? I'm no math major, but $3.5 million out of 50 million is only going to get us at best a month. So I want to make that point very clear. Second, as it pertains to the original emergency declaration, which appears to be the issue in question, my question for the solicitor is, how would the council go about removing the emergency declaration? Would that be something we'd have to put on the agenda? and then vote as a council to remove that authority from the president? Is that how that works?
What you'd be doing is you'd be revoking the declaration of municipal emergency. You wouldn't.
Gotcha. So in a sense, I think rather than debate this ad nauseum, because quite frankly, I'm getting tired of hearing the same arguments week after week, and it's wasting my time, and I'm upset by this, extremely upset by this. I think Councilor Driggs and Councilor Cook should put it on the agenda, and let's vote whether or not we want to continue under this emergency declaration, because we're obviously not getting anywhere, and I feel like I'm banging my head up against a wall. And my final point, because Councilor Driggs has said this on numerous occasions this evening, that she is a lawyer. My suggestion is, if you disagree with all of this, take us to court, because we've had nothing but lawsuits in front of us, and it's been either Councilor Driggs or Councilor Cook or a member of the TTA, sue us if you don't like it, because I'm done with this, and I think we need to vote and move on, or put something on the agenda and let's revoke the emergency declaration. But we cannot keep doing this every 2 weeks. I'm tired of it.
Yes.
Denise.
I just want to, because I was brought up as the vice president and you ran stuff by me, it's not abnormal for the president of the town council to run things by the vice president when he is in a meeting. You did run it by me. I did agree with you, but if I didn't agree with you, I would not expect you to change your mind. You were the person that was to make the decision. And to bring up another point about the president talking to the vice president, I know it's past practice. It happened last year before me and you became vice president and president. The president of the town council back then mentioned on numerous times that he ran stuff by the vice president. So for that to be a point is ridiculous.
So let me ask a question here. Does anybody have any comments or questions actually about the executive order and moving the FTR? John?
So in the interest of time, and because Robert's rules would dictate this, I'd like to make a motion to approve the executive order 2020-10 that would push the FTR to the third Saturday in June, to a date no later than, from a third Saturday in June to a date no later than 65 days after the fiscal year 2021 state budget is enacted into law.
Second.
There's 2 seconds.
Now we can have discussion to move on.
Is there anybody who wants to discuss the actual specifics of the executive order?
I do. The only 2 comments I want to make is, and I'm going to vote against it, and the reason I'm going to vote against it is I am not convinced. First of all, as I mentioned in the prior meeting 2 weeks ago, and it's in the that I'm not convinced we can't have an FTR, and the budget committee has been stopped from doing its budget using whatever figures they have. We're holding out for revenues that may or may not come. What we do know is what we have now. I think it's time that they make a budget. It may involve cuts, who knows, but I think that's their duty. And the second issue I have is, and while I'll vote against it, is I still am not convinced, and I know still about it later, but I'm not convinced that we can't just continue the prior budget if we don't have a budget by July 1, by the end of the fiscal year, that we continue with our last year budget, and under Rhode Island general law, a tax levy no greater than what was in existence can continue on. So those are my reasons.
Okay, and just to clarify, that's coming up a little bit later. The solicitor's already given his opinion on that. Is there anybody else who has a comment on the specifics? Mike?
I just want to clarify the timeline because I think it's important. You did have a council meeting 2 weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago, Monday. That week, you were correct. I think Chris was involved in at least 1 or 2 calls, one of them which I was on. And it was not until those calls were completed, I think by the Friday, that I believe on a Saturday or a Sunday, I indicated that I, as a prophylactic, that I would prepare an executive order for you to consider on a Sunday night, or it's either Sunday night or Monday morning. I can't remember, all the days kind of blend in. And it was, I believe it was signed on Monday the 4th. as indicated. So to suggest that it was signed right after the last council meeting is not correct. There was a whole week that went by. And again, from the legal perspective, it was my legal opinion to the town administrator and to the council president that if the town was going to move the FTR again, that it should be done before the deadline of the Budget Commission's submission of their budget, which I believe they were planning on doing it on, I think, May 7th, I believe, or 6th. I can't remember the exact date. So that is the exact chronology. It was not signed right after the council meeting. It was signed a 1 week after the council meeting while we were waiting for that information. We were frankly hoping, or at least I was frankly hoping, that we had better numbers or better information from the state. So I just want to make that clear.
Anybody else want to comment on the specifics of the executive order?
I just have one thing to say, not on the executive order, but I have to say that.
We're discussing the executive order, Donna. That's what we've moved on to here.
I know, but there were comments made about people feeling differently about something, and I think it was very insulting, my counselor Edwards, to say such a thing. I have to respect what he says, and to say that it's a waste of time would be insulting if I said that to him, if he felt differently about something. And it's not the first time he said it. And I don't think that's a good way to go, to be trying to be insulting to people because they have a difference of opinion. And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, I'm just gonna say one thing here, and that is I'm sorry that you feel insulted, but at the same time, when questions have been asked or answered, or we've had the same discussions over and over again, I think sometimes people find it frustrating because we've had that same discussion. I would like to say something about the executive order, and I'd like to make a comment about why I don't think the budget committee can go forward. And I'm just going to throw out a couple of questions here that you know I think are germane to this. First of all, we don't know if we set a school budget and then the school funding is cut, is the municipal side going to have to make that up? The answer seems to be yes. So we don't know school numbers. If the school gets CARES money, which we think that they will, does that count towards our maintenance of effort? And does it count towards our maintenance of effort for next year? We don't know the answer to that. And that's a big deal in the budget. Are we getting our motor vehicle phase out? We don't know. So there are things that not only would they potentially affect the budget for this year, but some of them potentially set the maintenance of effort for the following year. So those are things I think personally we really should know before we set a budget. I don't have anything else to say on this. If there's a motion, I will entertain it. John?
Madam President, I did already make my motion. The last point of discussion I had before we move on to a vote, I believe was seconded by Councilor Perry.
Oh, that's right. Sorry about that.
In any case, the last piece I wanted to add for Councilor Cook, I apologize if you took my remarks in an insulting manner. That was not my intent. My intent is merely to lay out that I am personally tired of having the same discussions week in and week out that are not relevant to the agenda item at hand. That was it.
So there's a motion and a second. Councilor Edwards?
Steve Clark might have a comment. I'm sorry, Madam President.
Steve?
No, Steve Clark, no comment.
Okay. Councilor Edwards?
Yes.
Councilor Perry?
Yes.
Councilor DeMedeiros?
Yes.
Councilor Clark?
Yes.
Councilor Driggs?
No.
Councilor Cook?
No.
And I am a yes. Okay, moving to item B, Town Administrator, review, discussion, and possible vote for extension of the amnesty trash program, allowing each resident to put out one non-town bag of trash for collection each week I think that originally this had I don't want to say an expiration date, but it had a review date, a review date of early May as to whether or not we were going to continue this. So, Chris?
I recommend that we continue out at least to the, probably the end of the fiscal year.
No,
Denise?
so Chris, what you're saying is continue it until July?
July
Well,
1st.
July 1st.
Yeah, June
I
30th.
would rather, well, I guess I can say this now. I'd rather continue it till June 1st and revisit it on June 1st.
So when is your meeting?
May 28th.
Okay, so you want to do it May 28th?
That's what I would think. I would like a monthly review of it. I'm not saying I disagree with it at all, and we may have to go to July 1st, but I would like a monthly review of it.
I would just say from my standpoint, the comments that we're getting are really, they're affecting the people that it's really intended to affect. And it would be the seniors who are really fixed incomes who have had issues with this. They are very appreciative of the fact that there is the allowance of having a 30-gallon bag to be able to put out this non-town related, so.
John?
So listen, I'm in favor of extending this. Obviously, I was the one who initially brought it forward. I did want to mention, and I think it is relevant to this particular item, but we may want to have a look at some of the other executive orders that were put into effect as well, because I believe they had some expiration dates there also. And if those need to continue, we should probably, get those continued. Just a thought. And with that, I'll make a motion to extend to June 1st, where we revisit this at our next council meeting on the 28th.
I'll second that.
Denise, did you want to say something?
No.
Okay. So, do we need to take a vote on this, or can we do it by consensus? Mike, you want to vote?
No, need a vote.
Okay. So there's a motion and a second. John?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Denise?
Yes.
Donna?
Yes.
Nancy? Nancy? How are you voting?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm yes. So we'll take this up at the next meeting. Announcements, comments, and discussions. Town solicitor, respond to 5520 email from Councilor Driggs related to continuation of tax levy under state law to new fiscal year and casino revenue. Mike?
Thank you. So I think everyone got a copy of the email that was sent to me by Councilor Driggs. And I included it for a couple of reasons. One is I want to be very clear. I enjoy my role as the solicitor of the town of Tiverton, and I enjoy working with every council member. And I do not want to be perceived as not wanting to do something or to assist a council person if they have questions or concerns or interpretation of this or that. So, and I do get those calls from many of the council members, and I'm happy to assist, especially when they have specific questions. So so my intention of putting this on the agenda was not to forestall that process from continuing, because I think it's important, because obviously, other than Ms. Driggs, no one else is a lawyer, and sometimes you get a little tongue-tied and a little gun-shy as to what something means. However, what concerned me a little bit, and I did forward this email to Mr. Cotter, is that Ms. Driggs asked me for a legal opinion, specifically with regard to two items. One is the interpretation of the Rhode Island General Laws 4435.5, and then most importantly to me was the issue of the casino revenue, which she outlines in her email. Let me just take one thing at a time. As far as the levy issue 4435.5, the title of that chapter is Property Tax and Fiscal Disclosure, Municipal Budgets. And it really has to do with what a town or city has to disclose when they put together their budgets before they vote upon it. And so the provision that's listed in her email, it says no property tax levy in excess of that in the current fiscal year shall be levied until a public hearing has been held as outlined in section 4435.6. That's basically saying you cannot increase a levy unless you have a public hearing. The question that remains, and this has been a topic of calls on the governor's call and with the governor's staff, is whether or not state law allows a town to, once a budget ends, we know that their budget continues, but state law does not seem to be clear, and there seems to be broad consensus on this, in that the levy that supported that budget cannot continue without some affirmative action or vote of a council or an FTR or FDM. And so that's the issue there. So right now, the opinion is this: the budget can continue, but the levy ends, and the levy cannot be continued without some affirmative act of a council, of an FDR, and whatnot. So even though that doesn't say that in this statute, and again, this statute really has to deal with disclosure requirements, reporting requirements. So this would be, so I know, Ms. Driggs, if you're reading this to suggest that the levy can continue, there's no support for that either in case law or in consensus and whatnot, that the levy cannot continue without an affirmative vote of some public body. In this case, it would be the FTR in the town of Tiverton.
That's my question, but do you know, I did not research, is there case law on that particular sentence? Has it ever been used to say that in a town such as ours, where you have to have a public hearing before you can do the budget, so before you have that public hearing, it sounds like the preceding levy could be there as long as it is an increase. It could even be diminished. Has there been any case law on that?
I don't believe there's any case law on that. I haven't double checked that, but that's been generally the consensus of with the governor's office, with the governor's legal counsel and the solicitors who are on some of these calls, that the levy cannot continue without an affirmative act.
So my question to you is, do you think it would be worthwhile still to do some research as to whether there is case law that would support that? Because that's a big question we're facing. It would be a big answer.
That'll lead into the next topic, but if that's the wish of the council, I'm certainly able to do that research for you. The second question, having to do with the casino revenue, is a little bit more complicated, and as a lawyer, I'm sure you understand that it has to be the town's position that the revenue from the casino, the $3 million, is we need to be able to say from a legal perspective that is our position that we want, and we expect that $3 million. And the email that you referenced, I forgot what the language in the statute is, but I guess my larger point is, I don't think it's healthy for the town at this point to have these public discussions and a formal legal opinion written by me, or having even to discuss this in public at this point, because we don't really know what the state is going to do with that revenue. And so I don't want to disclose my hand. I don't want to disclose our legal strategy. I don't want to do anything that would jeopardize what I believe is the town's legitimate right and expectation to get the $3 million, at least in this fiscal year, if not the next fiscal year. So my concern, and the reason why I did forward it to Mr. Cotter, not only because he's been on these financials calls, and I know that he's been trying to set up a meeting with the Department of Revenue and the Lottery Commission, but I didn't want to, I'm happy to answer these questions, but I just think that they're more appropriately answered in executive session, where I can give what I consider to be free legal, not free, but give you my free legal advice as to my thoughts and where we are. I think so. And then the issue of, and really became an issue of and I respect your right as a council person to ask me anything, and you have, but you did ask for a legal opinion. And my reading of the charter is that a legal opinion by the solicitor can only be only be authorized by the vote, or at least the consensus of the town council. And before I put anything in writing, which you did request it in writing, which would obviously eat up into my time and the legal fees that the town charges, I wanted to get some backup or some support of the council if that's where the council wants to go with it. I don't think it's appropriate for me to be acting as the legal counsel for individual members when they want a legal opinion, because that's what your specific request. Again, let me just go back. I'm more than happy to talk to you in general, in broad terms of what a statute does and doesn't do if you have a question about it. But asking me to put a legal opinion when I read the charter gave me a little bit of concern, and that's why I deferred it to today's meeting.
I understand that, and I apologize if I took it upon myself to not get the town council approval first, but I just think both these questions are big ones. And it occurred to me that I would frankly like to see if the council would go forward and ask you to look into the levy question, because I think that would be huge. And in terms of the casino, it just struck me reading the thing that the state is obligated unless for some reason the gambling place itself stops offering these games, and that's not what's happened. They've just suspended them because they had to. So anyway, coming from.
I would like to make a comment on this one, particularly the casino one, especially since I have been mentioned and the executive order is mentioned here. And I actually find that second question a little bit troubling because it seems to ignore the facts. And frankly, the part here about whether or not the Tiverton executive order also mandating the closure of the Tiverton Twin River had an effect on the state's obligation to make up the shortfall. You know,
that's about
facts matter. So facts matter. And so let's talk about the facts, because frankly, you know, the only place I've seen this theory espoused is through the social media of former Councilor Katz. So let's talk about this. The Twin River Tiverton Casino was closed on March the 13th by order of the Division of Lottery and the Board of Health. We did not sign an executive order until March the 16th. So the casino was closed for 3 days before we even contemplated signing an executive order. We didn't have anything to do with it. There are no mentions whatsoever in the emergency declaration, in any of the executive orders that Tiverton has executed. There's not one word of mention about the casino. We didn't close it. The state closed it prior to our even declaring a state of emergency. And as far as the state of emergency goes, we declared the state of emergency at the request of the governor, like 38 other municipalities did. We all did. We were all requested to. And we were requested to because that triggers the entire emergency operations center. It activates the EOC. It activates our interaction with the Rhode Island Emergency Management Association and FEMA. And it's also what allows us to be reimbursed by FEMA for our costs. But somehow the argument that's being promoted out there on social media that somehow that somehow, because we signed a declaration of emergency, that this would hinder our argument with the state that we're entitled to this money is absolutely nonsensical. It's completely nonsensical. And frankly, I can't imagine why anybody out there is doing it other than for, political nonsense, because we didn't close the casino. It was closed before we declared a state of emergency, and our declared state of emergency was at the request of the governor for the reasons I've told you. I can't imagine that the state would possibly turn around and say to us, well, yes, we closed the casino, but you signed an emergency order that we asked you to sign. I mean, it's just foolish. And again, this is, I don't know why we don't have the actual facts here, and we have inaccurate, incomplete information. I don't understand that, because it's all publicly available.
So just to answer your question, first of all, I don't do social media. I don't read it. I don't go on it. I hate it. So I've not been part of that conversation or know anything about it. What occurred to me was, if there's any relevance to the question I asked Solicitor Marcello, that the language might prevent the state from stopping giving us the shortfall money. Were we going to be hurt in any way that we also had signed an executive order? That's where that came from, period. So don't put any thoughts in my mind of anything else. Thank you very much.
I just want to make clear that the facts are the correct. The casinos were closed by the state, by the lottery commission.
I totally.
No, I know. I just want to just make, so I don't want to, just want to clear up confusion. If you look at our executive orders that were signed after the state of emergency, it doesn't even mention the casinos because they were already closed. And frankly, they're state facilities, so we wouldn't really have any control even if we wanted to close them. So, and I do not believe that from a legal perspective, from an argument perspective, that the executive order declaring a state of municipal emergency, like every other city or town has done, would have any effect on the issue of casino revenues. That's just my legal opinion. If someone could raise it as a fact, I guess, and they will if they do. But again, I think everyone's goal should be this. And I know Mr. Cotter agrees with me. The goal should be that we should all be rowing in the same direction to make sure that the casino revenue for this fiscal year, for the amount of $3 million, is made good. As the statute requires, and we have to be very, very careful in the next fiscal year to make sure that we're all on the same page, that we expect the $3 million in the next fiscal year as well. That needs to be the town's position. The legal arguments for and against that we can talk about in a later time, but that's kind of thing from the fiscal perspective and from a government perspective. I would hope that's where the council wants to be.
Yes, John.
Just one quick question for you, Madam President. Does social media encompass things like podcasts as well?
I'm not a podcast listener, but I guess it might.
Thank you.
Chris.
So to get back to the question about whether or not Mike should actually do legal research on chapter 44-35, I just want to emphasize something before we waste his time and energy and effort. We have calls with the league every day. Peter Schaefer, who is the chief of municipal finance in the 20 years that I was on the budget committee, and Steve Coleman, who is currently on the Office of Municipal Finance, have all offered the issue that in order to carry a levy into next year, into 2021, it will take legislation. This statute of 4435 is nothing more than a mere notice that the town is required to provide anytime you change a levy. It doesn't give you the authority to carry the current levy forward. You would still have to put this notice out, even at the same token. Otherwise, they'd be on the call saying, just continue your levy till the next year. You don't have to worry about cash flow. Not only is it every call that I'm on, Denise Surratt is on her finance calls with all the treasurers in the state, and they're getting the same advice. You cannot bring a levy forward unless you have a change in the state law or unless you've had your FTR or your FTM.
But wouldn't it be interesting if there was this law that said you could?
Well, it's a waste of time.
All right. We've had a motion, a second, a vote, and I think we're ready to move on to the next item. Yes? So
There wasn't any vote or anything. It was just an update.
Oh, sorry. I'm looking at the wrong item on my list.
It's all good. It's late. We should be out of here by now.
Could I just, before we move on, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I just need to get some guidance as to where the council's wishes are to go with the research as requested by Mr.
Thank you. Thank you. I would request that it be done. I don't know, do we take a council vote? I don't know how.
Yeah, could be by motion, yes.
I move that the solicitor research to see if there is any case law that would.
We can't take a motion. We can't take a vote here though, right? Because it's under announcements. Are you just looking for consensus?
Well, consensus would be a vote. I'm sorry, and you're correct. I thought this was down for a vote. It's really just under discussion. We can put it on the next agenda. We can put it on the
Okay, thank you.
You know, I think that Mike is busy enough. I have in the past been on some of these calls. There are, you know, the best municipal solicitors on these calls, as well as finance, the governor's lawyers. I mean, I think if there was some piece of case law that existed that let you do this, somebody would have already seen it. So I feel like Mike has already got an awful lot on his plate. And I think inherently they're all researching it now anyway. So I'm not sure that we need to ask him to do anything else.
I mean, we can bring that up. I will say this, I've been charged by the Rhode Island League of Cities and Towns to actually begin drafting legislation to allow cities and towns to have some of these options that we're now talking about, including continuation of the levy. So that legislation will probably be introduced in June. But I'm happy to do whatever the council as a majority wants to do.
It'll have to be on the next agenda, right?
Yeah, unless you call it a special meeting for it, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Move on to the update from the administrator.
Town administrator, then update on the coronavirus operations, finances, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so as it relates to the COVID issues, with the two major departments, the police and fire are dealing with, they've successfully been dealing with each of the issues with it, dealing with the public. Their staffing tests have come back negative. And we're trying to get as much PPE as possible. There's been some hiccups in getting some of that material for us. As far as our operations go, everybody is on a very, this also goes to finances as well. We've cut back on every area that we can. And actually I'm bringing in the major directors this week to talk about further cuts that we're going to have to engage. The last item relates to the opinions. It was just that my major concern is having multiple council members ask for opinions that may be conflicting. And the fact that all written opinions go to the clerk's office to be published shows our hand, and I really didn't think that was appropriate until council had weighed in. So that's the short gist of where I'm at.
I would just like to say that, I'd like to express my appreciation to Chris and to Mike and to the entire town staff and police and fire. It's really challenging times to be working in municipal government right now. And everybody's working incredibly hard and keeping the best attitude possible. So I would just yet again like to thank everybody for all the work that they're doing in what is really a very challenging situation. You may have heard they updated the caseload today. We're up to 57 cases in Tiverton. So wash your hands, wash your hands, wash your hands. If there isn't anything else, oh no, I'm sorry. We do have one other thing, an update on the presidential preference primary. Jeannie, do you have anything to share with us on that?
Yeah, sure. The preliminary list for the final canvass was posted to the town website last week, and the Board of Canvassers will be meeting on Tuesday, the 12th at 4 p.m. via Zoom to approve the final canvass. Anyone with any issues on the preliminary list should contact the clerk's office as soon as possible. As of today, the clerk's office processed almost 2,300 mail ballot applications, and about 1,000 applications were received via return mail. So if you didn't receive your mail ballot application from the State of Rhode Island Board of Elections, please contact our office as soon as possible. It might be that that isn't part of that return mail group. So for instance, if your address had changed, your ballot might have been returned, so please contact the office. You can also go online to vote.ri.gov and fill out an application there. And Thursday, May 19th is the last day to submit your mail ballot application. So, and anyone who received a mail ballot application for a person that no longer resides at that address should bring it to the town hall, drop it off in the gray lockbox outside with a note indicating that that person no longer resides at that address. And once the mail ballot applications have been processed and certified by our local Board of Canvassers, the state will mail out the actual ballots, which will include a prepaid return envelope. And that's it.
Excellent. Well, if that's it, then
Motion to adjourn.
There's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll do this by hands or voice. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? I didn't think so. Okay, thank you, everybody.